Elijah is convinced that he is all alone. The way any of us can feel utterly alone on a really bad day. Who here knows the children's book, Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day? I'm moving to Australia, Alexander declares, because he's having the worst day ever. His favorite breakfast cereal is all gone. His mom yells at him when it's really his brother's fault. He gets gum stuck on his shoe. He has to wear his railroad train pajamas. I hate my railroad train pajamas. Although no one seems to be listening, he announces over and over again, I'm having a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. Just before bed, his mom says, some days are like that, even in Australia. Some days, I am convinced that the universe is conspiring against me. Every bump in the road feels like a personal insult. No milk for my tea, traffic on my route, a phone that's run out of battery power, till I am feeling put upon just like Alexander. And then there are the truly terrible, horrible, no good, very bad days. Like the day we learn that there's been an accident. The day we hear about the devastating diagnosis. The morning we learn about yet another mass shooting. And the world shifts off its axis. Everything stops making sense. We want to run or hide or throw in the towel. What's the point? We wonder. Everything we've done, all the hard work to make the world a better place, it's futile. There will always be another tragedy, another act of senseless violence. We say it's about love, people, but no one seems to be listening. That's how Elijah was feeling. Convinced that his efforts had been futile, convinced that the world is beyond being salvaged. He is out of patience and out of steam. He is certain that he is the very last person on earth who has kept the faith, and he has failed as a prophet. I am no better than my ancestors, he says. Kill me now. Maybe you feel Elijah's pain. I know I do. But I also recognize that Elijah has gotten a bit swept up in his own terrible troubles, and he's lost perspective. Devastating events like the ones this week, like the shootings at the Pulse Club in Orlando just last Saturday night. These are truly cause for lament. We fall on our knees, we shake our fists at the sky. My God, why have you forsaken us? In the face of devastating loss, there is no more natural response. But Elijah is not so much lamenting as he is indulging in a dose of self-pity. Yes, he is fleeing for his life. Jezebel has, after all, put a price on his head. But truth be told, he got himself into that pickle by killing the 200 prophets. This was not in the plan. God didn't ask him to do that. Elijah just got carried away with trying to prove God's power, and now he was on the run and feeling profoundly put upon. Fortunately, God doesn't get caught up in Elijah's drama. Like a patient parent, God gives Elijah a little time to stew, 40 days and 40 nights to be exact. He makes sure that Elijah eats and drinks, and he listens to him vent, not once, but twice. After that first tirade, God says, Elijah, why don't you come up to my office? i.e., meet me up on Mount Horeb. Horeb, which is another name for Sinai. Mount Sinai, the mountain where Moses hung out with God back when all the Israelites were traveling through the wilderness. God had to listen to a good deal of complaining back then, too. Israelites who had forgotten how miserable they were in slavery, who claimed that they were better off in Egypt than wandering through the desert. God didn't give up on them back then, and God doesn't give up on Elijah now. But neither does God permit Elijah to wallow in self-pity or give in to Elijah's dire view of the world. See, God takes the long view. God knows that the people's salvation does not depend on any one prophet, even that most famous prophet, Elijah. Go back, God says. Anoint a new king. Go, find your successor. There's more to do, but you don't have to do it alone. Maybe this is why they had to have the conversation up on the mountain, to give Elijah that broader view. Maybe as Elijah stood right where Moses had stood, he remembered that the journey is indeed long, that he followed in the footsteps of others who had persevered in the face of tremendous hardship. So who was he to complain? It's all about keeping things in perspective. Tragedies like the shootings at the Pulse Club in Orlando, they can send us spiraling. They can also remind us that what we've been doing all along matters. Proclaiming the gospel of love matters. Using inclusive language, extending an extravagant welcome, insisting that everyone means everyone, no matter your age or whomever you love, relentlessly interrupting attempts to degrade or demonize whole categories of people, repeating the obvious as many times as necessary. In the words of Reverend Eric Anderson, God made lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer folks, Muslim folks, black folks, brown folks, all folks. We're not the first to say it, and we won't be the last. But we are part of a line of fiercely faithful people who have confronted these same forces of destruction on God's behalf in every generation. Now, the task is ours. Not just ours, but we are called. Because we, here in this room, know, even on our worst days, that we are not in it alone. On our darkest days, friends, we are surrounded by people who can testify to the power of God's love. We heard some of the testimonies just last week as those of you who are graduating from high school reflected on the long-lasting bonds that you have formed with Saugatuck friends, people you may not have known or hung out with just at school. In many cases, those bonds were forged on mission trips, like the one we're about to take. And those of you who have gone before know how very life-changing those trips can be. Over the course of just a few days, we discover, or rediscover, that working together in community generates a kind of positive, powerful energy that spills out into all our interactions. We become more compassionate, more courageous, more welcoming, more generous-hearted, because we know someone's got our back. Several someones, in fact. That, my friends, is the power of community, God says, therefore, get up. Go and build that community. If you are out of steam, find someone else who can carry the standard for a bit, and while you're at it, ask them to tell you why they are here. On your bad days, let their convictions bolster you. And when it's someone else who's having a bad day, another person, another community, even one having the most terrible, horrible, very bad, no good day, then, friends, it is our turn. It is our turn to testify to the power of love, to speak about it loudly and unflinchingly, to tell the world that there is an alternative to bigotry, to fear, to judgment, to tell them that you have stood on the mountaintop, or in the Mexican desert, or on the seashore, or in the church, or on the playground, or among the children, and you have seen God's love poured out. You have felt it in the people who have welcomed you and borne you up. Indeed, we are not alone. We are surrounded by a fierce and devoted people. Elijah was not the only prophet left. In fact, there were at least 100 others waiting for his return. And the fate of the world, it did not rest on his shoulders alone. He did, however, have a part to play. And so do we, friends. So do we. So let's get to it. And thanks be to God. Amen.